So, we will do this, what is the expression? Old-fashioned way.
In keeping with our desire to make the movie as close to the other three as possible, Steven stayed on film for the entire process. In other words, we did not shoot digitally, and we did not edit digitally. We edited on film, which is very unusual today.
By the time we're a week finished with shooting, Steven will have the movie cut, and I'm always amazed at just how fast Michael is. He doesn't need to be cutting electronically because he's as fast as anybody cutting on Avid.
I think I'd cover my ears if I were you.
I think the most difficult for me, probably for Steven too, was that truck chase in the jungle, because that took a lot of intercutting. There was the plain action stuff with the principals in the cars.
You fight like a young man.
And the second unit shooting trucks and all of that, all the action. So those elements had to go together, and that was a lot of fun to do. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun to do.
We had several members of the creative team back from the first three movies, and certainly one of the most important was Ben Burtt, who was the sound designer and had worked on all three movies.
Ben has such a good ear for this. And Ben's been doing Star Wars pictures, he's been working at Pixar. I mean, he does stuff that defies the imagination. And he creates sounds like you've never heard before.
Well, because we've done three previous indie films, it's a well-established style and a well-established library of sounds, and any new Indiana Jones adventure is going to use whips, guns, explosions. So it's fortunate that we created a huge library for the first three films, and that we can start with that as a basic foundation upon which then we can build the sounds for the new movie. One of the first tasks I had was to really go back and gather all of the sounds together that had been created for the previous films. And we hired my son Benny Burtt to do that job, because it meant going into lots of old tapes and older recording formats which are no longer used anymore. And we wanted to go back to the original recordings wherever we could and digitize them now, get the highest quality copy into the computer, and then classify the sounds and get them all into a searchable database, because there's really thousands of sounds. The whip in the current film, much of it is taken from our original whip recordings, but we also actually did some new recordings as well.
Get on, Gramps!
There's a big chase that happens at Marshall College, and that was kind of one of the main things that I was dealing with. And there's lots of different vehicles throughout the film, and in this particular sequence there's a couple mid-century American cars, and then there's this motorcycle as well.
This is crazy! Somebody's gonna get hurt!
There's big crowds of students yelling and running, the library involved, there's crashes and skids and all that fun stuff. Richard Hims, who's the supervising sound editor, is the resident car fanatic here on not only on the ranch but on this particular show. So it was his job to go out, find the vehicles, and record them.
I've always wanted to do a big sword fight. When I think of the indie films, I always think of, I want to give things a classic sound. So I go back and I think, well, what are my favorite films from the far past that had a great sword fight in it? And there's a film called The Adventures of Don Juan with Errol Flynn. It has, I thought, some of the best sword fighting sounds in it. And so I searched around to find just the same type of rapiers that were used in that film. And when I found them, lo and behold, they sounded exactly like I wanted them to. The ants flowing across the ground is pretty much some sounds my son and I recorded pouring some corn feed that is used to feed the animals. Made a really good, steady, flowing sound, which we use for the ants in motion. To that, you add a layer of constantly crunching eggshells, just in your hands, just crunch, crunch, crunch. And then on top of that, you add some human vocals that have been sped up, and some of them are run backwards, so that you get just a tiny sense of them being alive. And I think adjusting the amounts of each one of these elements can create this attack of the ants. There's been a conscious choice to create the supernatural sounds as if maybe they were created for movies back in the 1950s. And that's my department, because those are the films that I saw as a kid. And I've tried to derive a style from those old movies, create new sounds in an old style. As an example, one of the little buzzing sounds that the skull makes is a sound I actually just heard in the parking lot. I went out to get in my car to go home, and I could hear this buzzing sound, and I realized it was a lamppost there in the parking lot, and something maybe was wrong with the lamp on top of the post, and it made a really loud buzzing sound. So I thought, that's interesting. So I had my recorder in the car, so I just recorded that sound right on the spot, and have found a lot of use for that bad electrical lamppost sound as a prime element in the skulls themselves.
Indy, the eyes.
There's a transition at the climax of the film from what I would say organic, natural sound, which is as the temple falls apart, we are hearing basically earthquake sounds, thunder and rumble and cracking stone and falling debris. But as that happens, it reveals a unusual, very high-tech, somewhat alien environment, the interior of a giant device, a travel machine or something of this nature. And so the transition goes from natural, organic sounds to a very electronic sound.
What the hell is that?
A portal! A pathway to another dimension!
There's a history of Indiana Jones, and we're trying to stay true to the history of it because it's such a great franchise, and I think the main goal is to keep with that spirit and keep it fresh, keep it new, but always have the link back to the earlier films.
You're a teacher? Part-time.
Talk about iconography. What really gives Harrison a lot of his esprit de corps is John Williams with that theme that he came up with. And Indiana Jones cannot exist without that theme. And of course, that theme would be nothing without Indiana Jones.
Jonesy!
So in the making of this picture, you'd hear the cast and crew whistling or humming this theme.
The initial presentations in the first film, if I'm at all right, were probably not march-like, but more heroic in the sense of energizing the character and creating a melody associated with Harrison's character. I think the emergence of it as a march was probably at the end of the process, where I had to write an end credit for the film, and the theme seemed to lend itself to a kind of march presentation. Mutt's music is principally a piece that I've actually called it on the soundtrack album, The Adventures of Mutt, because the combination of his sword fighting and his swinging on these vines and the heroics that he does, it refers in a little bit of a way to The Adventures of Robin Hood. The music is not similar, but only in the sense that it's a young hero's music in the tradition of the swashbuckler. I think the reappearance of Marion in the film is a stroke of wonder, and I think some of the warmest scenes have to do with Karen's portrayal of Marion.
Oh, Marion, you had to go and get yourself kidnapped.
Not like you did any better.
As you can tell, I was a fan of hers from day one and enjoyed doing the Marion theme from the first film and then relish the opportunity to bring it back to sort of paint it around and accompany her scenes and their scenes together.
Don't ever do that again.
Yes, dear.
Irina Spalko presented to me an opportunity to create a sexy film noir, if you like, theme to accompany a femme fatale, where you would hear a slithering saxophone and certain harmonic progressions that would depict this dark side of sensuality, and she's depicted musically with this, if you'd like to say, homage to the great film villainesses of the 1940s.
That's really beautiful.
She's not supposed to be sexy, but she is to me.
Oh, yeah. I think she'll be to a lot of men in black.
She's my kind of babe, you know. She will rule the world.
Exactly.
The Crystal Skull, certainly for its various appearances on the film, needed to have some musical identification. And what I tried to do was to try to get some kind of a homage, if you like, to the science fiction films of the 50s that would bring an aspect of nostalgia into this piece.
I want to just tell you that not only are you a blessing, but you're the only guy I know, that, except for one guy, who deserves to wear this.
Working with Steven is a particular privilege. And we come back to the series with the original team after 28 years. When you think about it, it's a remarkable thing. And this film is a very good illustration of that kind of very unique bringing together of people and collaboration and having it work so well after so many years.